Hey everyone, and welcome back to this week's development log for Blink. It's Wednesday at about 5:15 p.m. Just got back from work, and this is a little bit later in the week than I usually start my development log. However, the beginning of this week I wasn't feeling that well, allergies had me under the weather. The recordings just didn't turn out very well, so I scrapped them. We're starting over today, and I want to get you guys caught up with the progress I've made so far this week. Alright, so let's check out the Trello board I set up for this week. I was feeling pretty productive on Sunday, so I brought a ton of tasks into this column. We'll see where I get this week, but so far we're making good progress. The first item that I took care of was creating a custom particle sprite. And when I first created the particle system, we're just using the default square particles that Unity provided. And that was looking fine, but I wanted to see if I could take it a step further and customize it. So I've got that done, and I'll show you guys what that looks like. Second thing I wanted to take care of was a quick player movement direction defect, where if the player Firefly was moving to the left, in some cases he could have been facing to the right and vice versa. I just wanted to sync those things up. That was an easy fix when we got that knocked out as well so far. The third thing was implementing a bit of feedback that I got from a viewer called DWS Games. And he or she submitted the feedback that the player Firefly tracked the mouse or the finger a little too quickly, and it was a little bit unnatural looking. I totally agreed. So what I did was I went in and made a few tweaks to how I was moving the player, and that's resulted in the Firefly tracking the mouse a little bit less aggressively. I think overall that's resulted in the player moving a bit more gingerly, like a Firefly might actually move through the air. So I'm pleased with that. I'll show you guys a little bit of detail on how I achieved that. And finally, the big one. This is a task that's been on this board for a while now, and that's animating the target accuracy in multiplier texts. And that's, of course, when you fill a number of locales of the circle and you zoom out to that kind of intermission phase. I completed that. That was about 80 lines of code. I created a new script, and I'll probably end up walking you guys through a little bit of that. But right now, I just want to show you what the game looks like with all these improvements. So let's get to it. So let's start out by checking out this new particle that I created. The first step was to actually draw a little piece of art for this particle, which is not even that much different from the square, really. It just has a few more details on the outside. I imported that into the project and created a material from it, and that's just a Sprite default type shader where I dragged in this particular texture. The last step was going to the actual particle system on my target circle prefab down in the renderer section here, and I dragged that new material right into here. So if we go ahead and play, you'll see that I've got a slightly different looking particle than I did before. It's not just a simple square. To be honest, even though I learned some more about the particle system doing this, and I'm happy I was able to figure it out, I'm not even sure that I like this particle as much as the square. So I'm either going to revert this change or I'm going to take another pass at creating particle art. Either way, we figured it out, and I'm happy that we learned something there. Alright, next up is the code that sets the player direction based on the direction that the player is moving in. And this is all happening in this function called setSpriteForState, which is called within the player's update function. This is a really simple snippet of code here. We basically have the current position of our player transform, and I'm tracking the previous position. We compare the X values to see if the new player's X value is higher or lower than the previous one, and based on that we decide whether or not we want to flip the sprite. Pretty simple, and if we go ahead and play, you can see that that works as you might expect. Go to the right, he turns right. Go to the left, he turns left. And that's also the case for when he's idling around the screen here on his own. So, happy with that. Let's keep moving. Next up, let's talk about player movement. So this is the snippet of code that's solely responsible for moving the player close to the mouse position or the finger position if you're playing on mobile. This is super simple. We have the transform of the player here within the player script, and we're using linear interpolation just to move that position towards our mouse position. And the key part of this is the third argument, which is our movement speed. Now I added this movement speed value early on, and I had it set to 20, which meant that the Firefly was tracking the mouse very closely. If we look over here in the editor, I've set it back to 20 how I had it in the last video, and we can see that the Firefly tracks the mouse very closely. There's not much delay, and you can really kind of swing him around, and he's moving very quickly and very unnaturally for a Firefly. So I was just toying around with this value, and I found that if we get it down to about the 4 to 5 range, this is going to really improve his behavior and look a lot more natural. So I'll go ahead and drag him around now, and it's still pretty quick, and in fact we want the player to move him reasonably quickly so that we can get him to the target circle before the player's circle expands too much. but I think this is a much happier place where there's a lot more distance between the mouse and the Firefly, and he can kind of build up a little bit of speed before he moves around. I'm pretty pleased with this so far. I think there still might need to be some more tweaking in the future, but I think this is an improvement over the past episode, so I'm going to stick with it for now. Alrighty, last up for today was the big bit of progress I've made so far this week, which is animating updates to the multiplier when you reach the intermission stage between locales. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I do want to give you a quick overview of how I achieved this. So we're in the Game World class right now, and in my function called Show Intermission Stats. Oh, I need to capitalize that I. And in this function, we're doing things, pretty much everything that we want to do between the states of the game where you're filling circles. Basically, after we've zoomed out, we want to do some things during the intermission, like update the score. What I've added here is a coroutine to update the Multiplier Ui. And that's performed by this other script that I wrote called Score UI Updater. Now, there's kind of a lot going on here, but it's really fairly simple, so I want to walk through it really quickly. The backbone of what's happening in here is this function I wrote called Move and Scale Text. And this is pretty straightforward. We pass in the transform that we want to move, and then the target position, the target scale, and the time over which we want to perform these transformations. And the content of this function is basically just to perform those transformations over that target time. In this function, the update multiplier UI, this is what's being called by our show intermission stats function in the game logic world. In this, we're actually performing a number of consecutive animations that are going to animate the combination of the accuracy and the multiplier, create a new multiplier value, and zoom it back to its position underneath the score. And I know that sounds like a lot, but I'll show you in just a second. Actually, I'll go ahead and show you right now. If we jump over into the game, let's go ahead and fill between 5 and 10 circles, and you'll see how the multiplier text updates here. Still some tweaking to do with how long it takes to fill up those circles. All right, now that still is a little rough around the edges. Some things could be perfected, but I'm really happy with the way that looks so far. Pretty much our value for the multiplier is going to slide down and to the left. We're going to have a value for our accuracy appear over on the right, and then the two are going to slide into the middle and merge together, and the multiplier number is going to update based on that accuracy, and then finally it's going to slide back up underneath your score. And if you look at my comments here on the right, these are the individual little pieces of code that do that. First, we set the accuracy text, and the accuracy is not actually visible at this point, but we just want to have it updated. Next, we're going to animate the multiplier text down and to the left, like I mentioned. Following that, we animate the accuracy percentage text up and to the right. So at this point, they're on the same Y value, but they're just on opposite sides of the screen. And then we have a block of code here to actually move them towards each other in the middle to an X value of 0 and combine them. And then finally, we'll actually update this multiplier value and slide it back to its original position. So I'm pretty pleased with how this came out. This is a little bit kludgy to kind of look at in this state, but I think it's pretty simple overall, and it's going to give me some more flexibility to tweak it in the future if I want. This was something that I was really not looking forward to doing, but it was far easier than I thought it was going to be, and I'm pretty pleased with the result. So at this point, we just got to figure out what we're going to do next this week. Alright, so back to Trello to figure out what else I want to work on this week. I took a few moments to look through the tasks that I have left on here, and I was actually pretty excited to see that I'm super close to kind of what I might consider an MVP in terms of being able to play the game all the way through, start the round over, and just enjoy the general gameplay. Pretty much the only two hurdles left are doing a few balancing tasks to make sure the gameplay is properly challenging and rewarding, and then also creating an in-game scene, meaning after the scene has gone completely dark, rather than just start the game over like it does right now, I want to go to some screen to show the score, perhaps an opportunity to see a leaderboard, something like that. So I think that's where I'm going to take my efforts for the rest of this week. However, right now, I've just been working a lot this week, and I think it's time for me to just kind of enjoy a night off. So I'm probably just going to play some video games and hang out with Kate and just relax this evening. So I'll catch up with you guys soon. Hey everyone, welcome back. It's about 6:30 a.m. on Friday morning. Stepped outside here for a breath of fresh air and it's surprisingly warm, so I'm kind of enjoying it out here this morning. Anyway, going to be going inside soon to make some progress on Blink. I've got a couple balance tasks I want to work on this morning, and once I put in a little bit of work on those, I'll probably just relax for a little bit. So, I'll see you guys inside. Alright, welcome back. It's about 7:45 in the morning and I just finished up all the balancing tasks that I wanted to work on. So we'll jump into some gameplay and I'll briefly talk about what I changed. To start off, I made some changes to these target circles as well as the fill circle of the player Firefly. Previously both could be a bit too small, meaning that the target circles were so small that you couldn't get to them in time to accurately fill them. And in some cases, the fill speed of the player circle was so low that once you got to the target, you'd have to kind of hold your finger there and wait for a really long time to fill it up. And I didn't think either of those were very good experiences, so I tweaked them. I also made some changes to the particle system. Now I'm going to fill a couple perfect circles here, and you'll still see those big explosions, but if you're not doing so well, you don't see that many particles anymore. And the reason for that was just to make the player really feel more rewarded for a perfect fill. Previously, you kind of used to see particles all over the screen no matter what, and I thought that kind of took away some of the special feeling of having a lot of particles on the screen. So now you only see those if you do really well. Next up was the number of target circles per locale. It was between 5 and 10, and now I think it's between 10 and 20. That just felt like a little bit longer, or better time. If you're kind of in the zone filling circles, you'll get to stay here for a bit longer and capitalize on that. And then the last change I made was to the score UI up here. We'll see if I can get to that point. That number is clearly wrong. But I just made some changes to how these animate up here. And I think it looks a little bit nicer, although I'm sure it still needs some tweaking. And finally, the last change I made was to how the multiplier is calculated. Previously, that multiplier could go up by values of like 2, 4, 6, and 8. And after playing for a few minutes, you'd have an astronomical score. I didn't think that was a really good experience. It kind of just got ridiculous and the score didn't mean much. Now, in order to increase this multiplier, at a certain locale you have to get equal to or above 95% accuracy. We'll see if we can do that. It's kind of difficult actually, which is what I want. I want the player to be rewarded for kind of spending time playing the game and getting good at it, I suppose you could say. So we got a very wrong accuracy value. If we'd gotten over 95% legitimate accuracy there, we'd see that multiplier go up just by 1. And it's never going to go up by more than 1 at a time. But I think that's still very rewarding, and if you string together a couple good locales, you're going to see your score really pumping up a bunch, which is fun. And I suppose I should mention the reason I added a multiplier to begin with was that eventually I plan to add a feature where at the end of the game, once you've failed, and you can only do this one time per round, you'll have the option to keep going if you watch a video advertisement. Now I know that's probably a sore spot for some people, but I do plan to make this game free to play, and that will be the only place an advertisement will show up. It will be optional, so you can just restart a new round if you want. I think it just gives the player a way to, if they have a great multiplier going, they can keep that multiplier and extend their run for a little bit for a better shot at the high scores. Or, if you just want to support me and my development, that's a great way to do it. So I'm pleased with these balance enhancements. I'm probably going to head back to Trello and figure out what I'm going to work on this weekend, and I'll catch up with you guys in a little bit. Hello everyone, and welcome back. It's Saturday around 7:20 a.m. or so, and I'm about to sit down and make probably the last few tweaks to Blink before I wrap up this week's video. Well, it's only been a few minutes here and I've managed to wrap up this defect. It seems like so many of my defects come from failing to reset variables in the in-game function call. In this case, I was setting score multiplier to 0 instead of 1 for some reason, and I was also neglecting to reset the locale accuracy. So now that I've got those things working, you can kind of play round after round and expect your score and multiplier to behave as they should. Alright everyone, I think that's going to wrap up this week's development log for Blink. Now, over the past couple weeks, I've been enjoying learning about making YouTube videos and creating what you've seen so far. However, I think an average video length of about 15 minutes is a bit too long. So as I move forward, I plan on uploading shorter videos that focus more on specific game development concepts, problems that I'm solving, or features that I'm working on. So keep an eye out for those. Anyway, I appreciate you watching. I'd love to hear from you in the comments section, and I'll see you in the next video.